live look from St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City this morning as thousands of mourners from across the world line up to pay their final respects. We are continuing our coverage this morning and remembering the life and legacy of Pope Francis, who passed away on Monday morning at the age of 88. Pope Francis, who was the first Latin American pontiff to lead the Catholic Church, was known for his charismatic and loving style and was introduced as the 266th Pope back in 2013. And to give us some more insight on Pope Francis's legacy this morning, we are now joined by the Bishop of the Diocese of Tyler, Bishop Gregory Kelly, live in studio. Bishop Kelly, thanks so much for joining us on this Thursday morning.
You're welcome, Miller. Good morning. Good morning.
We certainly appreciate it. So I want to start this morning about hearing the news on Monday morning that Pope Francis passed away. When did you exactly find out, and what was going through your mind when you found out the news?
You know, it was right before 5 o'clock on Monday morning. I woke up and I looked at my phone, and there was a text message from a priest that I knew from the Diocese of Dallas, where I was until 2 months ago. And it was the time when it was 3:39. It said Pope Francis had died. I said, oh my, you know, it really came as a surprise, because he seemed like, you know, after being in the hospital so long, that he was doing much better, and that he was very active on Easter Sunday. He'd met with the Vice President. He went around St. Peter's Square. You know, it looked like he was resuming some of his normal activities. So it came as a surprise, yeah.
Over the years, did you get to actually meet Pope Francis in person? Well,
you know, it was he who appointed me auxiliary bishop of Dallas at the end of 2015. I was ordained in 2016, and one of the requirements for a new bishop is they go to bishop school. And so it's a week-long formation process in Rome, and on the Friday of that week is an audience with Pope Francis, and each bishop gets to walk up and actually meet him personally. So that's the only time I actually met him in person, and he was just very warm and ingratiating, you know, beautiful smile, yeah. Yeah.
What made Pope Francis such a charming figure during his tenure as the leader of the Catholic Church?
You know, it was just these gestures. I mean, he would do these dramatic gestures. Like when he was first elected Pope, he wanted his first trip to go to the island of Lampedusa, where a lot of immigrants from Africa, you know, coming across the Mediterranean in insufficient boats were drowning. And he had such a heart for immigrants, the people who had to be on the move for whatever reason, and he wanted to go there, and his staff kept kind of putting him off. And one of them got a call from the Italian Airlines saying that they had received a call from a Jorge Bergoglio, you know, with his name, booking 4 seats on a commercial flight to Lampedusa. He was just going to go himself, you know, and so that's when they went. That was his first trip, and he went down there. You know, I mean, washing the feet of prisoners every Holy Thursday. I mean, wandering off into the crowd at Rio de Janeiro. I think he was a nightmare for his security detail, because he just wanted to be close to people, and you know, he really really paid very much attention to each individual person. Yeah.
What were some moments throughout the years, personally to you, that stuck out about Pope Francis and everything he did as the leader of the Catholic Church?
The one more than any other one is that during the pandemic, March 27th of 2020, you know, he's standing there in his white outfit in a completely empty St. Peter's Square, which would normally just be packed. Yeah. And it was a rainy night. It was wet on the pavement, and he's talking about, you know, the gospel where Jesus is asleep in the boat with his disciples, and he wants us, you know, the pandemic, he says, is teaching us that we're all in the same boat. That, you know, that we can't decide that some people don't count, and that a lot of the people that really counted during the pandemic were people who just very ordinary firefighters, policemen, nurses, chaplains, you know, restaurant workers, you know, that were just keeping the very basic things going, caring for sick people. And he really, I mean, that's just the image more than any other one that stands out for me. Yeah.
Personally, what inspired you about Pope Francis that maybe made you and others around you better Catholics?
I think his kind of position is that the first, I mean, to really, that we need to be a church that goes out. You know, not just simply waiting for people to come to the church or kind of taking care of ourselves, but the church has a mission to the world. And especially, he always talked about going out to the peripheries, and not just to, you know, the physical peripheries, but also, you know, people who, for whatever reason, were kind of on the edges of things, and, you know, the poor, immigrants, the elderly. You know, he just had a special care for upholding the dignity of each person. Yeah.
During his tenure, what do you think changed in the Catholic Church with his time as the pontiff?
I really think it's that more than anything. You know, he very much emphasized in the latest synod, which is an international meeting after the Second Vatican Council. There'd be a synod of bishops every 3 years. He broadened that to include priests, lay people, religious. He wanted us to be a church that talked to each other, that encountered each other, and that in the midst of that understood the mission of the church better. It didn't affect, the doctrine, but it really affected more like the manner of the church engaging the world, because it's ultimately the Holy Spirit that changes hearts. Mm-hmm.
As thousands of people right now are lining up to pay their respects to Pope Francis there at the Vatican, what does that say about the Catholic faithful right now, for definitely the legacy of Pope Francis, how he was able to inspire a lot of people around the world?
Mm-hmm. I think first of all, he's our Father. Mm-hmm. It's 1.4 billion people in the world, I think, that are Catholic, and he's our Father. It's a big family, and big families oftentimes have struggles or differences, and yet he's our Father. And he passed away, and we pray for him, and we express gratitude. We think about him, and and just what he did and what he accomplished. Mm-hmm.
Finally, before we go to break here, how do you think Pope Francis is going to be remembered? I know it might be a hard question to answer this morning.
I think that he will be remembered again for the gestures that spoke of the substance of his attention, which was to, he said that we have a lack of a plan that includes everybody, and that he wanted, whether it was, and for us to be a good Samaritan church, that we bind up the wounds of other people.
Bishop Kelly, I wanted to switch over now to the next steps with the Catholic Church, mm-hmm. and the process at the Vatican there right now for picking the next Pope to lead the Catholic Church. If somebody doesn't know about that process, can you explain a little bit about how it's working right now, or how it's going to work after his funeral coming up on Saturday?
Sure. So the custom is all the cardinals in the world gather in Rome for the funeral on Saturday, and then there are 9 days of masses for the repose of his soul, asking the Lord to receive him into heaven. And during that time also they have meetings. 'Cause a lot of the cardinals, another effects of Pope Francis is that he named cardinals from all over the world, places that had never had a cardinal before. I remember one, Cape Verde, off the coast of Africa, very small countries in Asia. And so a lot of the cardinals don't know each other. So a lot of this will be getting to know each other. Right. The Camerlengo, who's Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who is formerly of Dallas, has the responsibility of kind of the administration of the Holy See during this time, and kind of putting together reports, financial reports, the state of the church for all the cardinals, to give them kind of a state of what's going on in the world, but also to help them get to know each other. There'll be a series of presentations and of that during this time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what you talked about right there, Cardinal Kevin Joseph Farrell, like you just talked about, assumed the role of acting head of the Catholic Church on April 21st. I believe you used to work with him there in the Bishop of Dallas. Is that correct?
I did. I worked with him for 8 years. A wonderful man to work with. He was bishop in Dallas for 9 years. I worked for him most of that time. He ordained me a bishop in 2016. And he's very hardworking, very dedicated. Just a man of great integrity, and I think an ideal choice a great administrator. So I think it's an ideal choice to take on that role. Mm-hmm.
And for him, and if somebody doesn't know, what is he doing right now, since he is the acting head of the Catholic Church?
It's basically an administrative head. A lot of the things that require the Holy Father, like the appointment of new bishops, all that comes to a halt for now. But it's basically just keeping the basic function, administrative, financial, all those different things running while they prepare for what's called the conclave. Mm-hmm. People are probably more familiar with that word now because of the movie that came out last year. But that's the gathering of all the cardinals under the age of 80 that have a vote in electing the new Pope.
What kind of qualities do you think the Catholic Church is now looking for as they pick the next Pope?
I think it's someone that can build on the legacy of Pope Francis. I think somebody, he was the first Pope in forever and ever to come from South America, mm-hmm. From the global South, and so much more of the Church, a lot of the numbers, the energy of the Church is in South America and Africa, and I think somebody that's sensitive to the needs of those local churches as well as the Church throughout the world. Personally, what do you want to see when it comes to qualities in the next Pope? I think somebody who is a pastor. I think that Pope Francis is very much a pastor. And he was attentive to individuals. He really thought, his very first work, The Joy of the Gospel, was really a work of how do we preach the gospel? How do we get this word out in a way that people can understand it and take it in?
I'm guessing you don't plan on, you would already be gone if you were going to the funeral.
No, I won't be able to go, no.
On Saturday, but if somebody's going to be tuning in, what can they expect during the funeral on Saturday?
I think they can expect, a very packed, crowded St. Peter's Square with a lot of red, because the vestments are red. Just very long, solemn. I mean, it's basically the celebration of the Holy Eucharist. And commending him to the Lord, who first. And then I think there'll probably be a procession over from St. Peter's to St. Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major Church. He'll be the first pope buried there. He had a special affection for Mary. He would always go to that church before and after, all of his international trips. It's in an immigrant neighborhood, and he wanted to be buried there with less, with less pomp and circumstance. Yeah.
Finally, when can the world expect to hear the name of the new pope?
When he's elected. I mean, I think it's, they take 4 ballots a day once they start gathering. It's a very, enclosed process in the Sistine Chapel, and I think, I forget the name of the man who comes out on the balcony and says, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope. I think that's when we'll know.